Hello and welcome to Weekly Open, the final weekly open of 2021. 2022 soon. That's the one thing that we know that is soon. We also know that this podcast is brought to you by FTX. Go to weeklyopen.com/FTX. You can make a trade there today. We're appreciative of their support over the last year. Go directly from one asset to the other. You can buy the dip. We're going to be talking about whether DeFi pump stuff is a scam or not. If you want to ape into DeFi, you can do it on FTX. You can earn yield on your tokens as well. Go to weeklyopen.com/FTX. It's just me and Luke today. Luke, how you doing, buddy?
Doing well, man. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to everyone watching, too.
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. I love this time of year. You know, it's usually pretty quiet. You get to do a lot of reflecting, a lot of planning. I'm hoping we'll be able to do a little bit of that on the show today. Talk about maybe some thematic stuff that we're interested in for 2022. Talk about maybe what we did best and worst in 2021. Figure some things out. But why don't we start with just kind of a state of the market? You've got a Bitcoin chart open there, I think. You want to give us the lowdown?
Sure. I have the potential, just the most ironic, the most entertaining outcome in crypto right now would be if December 17th was the exact bottom. Again. Right now, I mean, don't hold your breath, but that's where we're at. It's like, I don't know who's controlling that for the past 2 or 3 years and just laughing. But all you have to do apparently is log into your account once a year. December 17th, happened in 17, happened in 18, 19, 20, now 21. If this is the bottom, man, I don't know who's pulling the strings, but it's going to be incredible to look back on in a year if that's the macro bottom. I don't know.
Yeah.
But basically the market's pumped off that. Bitcoin's back up, DeFi potentially catching a resurgence, which we'll talk about. And yeah, man, everything's moving. Even the NFT people are saying NFTs are back. So it's a bit of a rally into the new year.
Man, Keyboard Monkey last night tweeted something like he swept Cool Cats and Cryptodes and bought a couple other things, I think. And his one tweet just started a flurry of buys across a lot of collections that weren't yet moving. So Bored Apes had been going nuts. The floor on Punks had already recovered from 53 to 65 or 67 or so. But you hadn't really seen it get outside of those two. Mutant Apes had started to pick up. And I think he just picked up on some of that volume that was occurring there. And then from his tweet, it's like a bunch of people that had sidelined themselves over the past few months were just willing to buy. And all of a sudden you saw like 100, 200 purchases of many popular collections start to move. And it was very impressive. Like the Bored Ape and Mutant Ape volume has just been absolutely wild. I've been very impressed, but it's also like it's not just these, it's like a community of them. You know, like every Bored Ape derivative and stuff is also pumping. It's just been quite something, but even art blocks were getting bought up last night.
Yeah. I wonder, I saw like not only Keyboard Monkey, I think Gary Vee joined in on the what was he calling it? They were calling it like Sweep Night 2021. And then you had man, the activity's just been nuts.
Vincent Van Doe also, like a lot of these bigger accounts. And what was interesting is so many people were, tax harvesting, they just want to take the loss. They bought something for 30 ETH and they're selling it for 3. And what it created is the floors were so artificially low that doubling off the floors only took a handful of purchases on many of these collections. So it was a relatively low risk trade for the people that were earlier to that sweep. And all of a sudden you're kind of buffeted by 100%, maybe even more on some of those collections. Yeah.
I mean, the interesting thing about Mutant Apes were like 6 ETH almost a month or two ago. Floor. They've almost doubled. So obviously Bored Ape, that momentum is going to just be huge for the ecosystem. But the interesting thing about a lot of these NFTs that I kind of think about is I wonder if it's going to be a DeFi 1.0, like a DeFi summer dynamic where even if, let's say, Comp, Aave, and all these things start doing well like they are right now, are they ever going to reach their all-time high in ETH terms? And like, sure, some collections will, like the ones that have momentum right now. But I wonder if like art block, like let's say NFTs continue to have this resurgence, like we're seeing, you know, we're only a few days into it. Let's say NFTs start doing really well. Do they actually reach their ETH all-time highs again? Or is it kind of like that DeFi thing where it's always like, that would be the dream, but no, we're probably not going to get there.
I think the expectations are probably a little lower this time.
Yeah.
But the pricing was quite good on some of those. So that you could have gotten things that you believe in longer term for a nice discount where they've already shown some historical success. Yeah, like Chromie Squiggles, they were sub 5 ETH. And of art blocks, this is one of the ones that's hardest to move because, you know, so many squiggles are similar and there's a decent number of squiggles. There's 10,000 of them, right? Yeah. 9.2.
That's a lot of squiggles, dude.
Yeah. So like you know, you look at that uptick in volume that you see there.
Yeah.
So moving a collection like that is harder than some, and it moved up 50-60% pretty rapidly. So I think when you can get a squiggle at 4 ETH, 5 ETH, whatever people were being able to pick those up at, and some of the nicer ones too, like the more rare ones for not large premiums. Yeah, it's definitely a change, and it makes you a little more iron-handed because you're not afraid like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. You know, I'm not going to be able to do it. So yeah, that's pretty impressive. Yeah, look at that 7-day volume up 400% on Mutant Apes.
And basically everything, like even just random ones are catching, you know, 50%, 100%. People are for the first time, maybe that was the Gary Vee pump, but I saw a lot of people looking at new NFTs. I don't know. It's such a, it's such like a hot hand market. Like if things are kind of moving and then, you know, some of the loudest NFT voices on Twitter pump it for a little bit. It's like, how much of this is organic? How much of this is them momentum chasing? It's like little parallels of the fungible market shows up here.
You know, somebody has to be the one calling things out to get other people interested. It's just how it works anytime.
Right.
The ones I think when I look at what's been moving and all that, the derivative stuff of like Bored Apes, unaffiliated clubs, you know, like there's like old apes and wifey apes or who knows what, like none of those are going to play out well. And that wouldn't be where I'd be spending my ETH, but maybe there's something going on there that I don't know about. But I think some of these did end up being on a relative basis a deal for people. Anyway, that's NFTs. Yeah. NFTs very much look like they hit a local bottom, at least. That's one of the things that we can close off 2021 with, is that the market kind of front ran the tax selling, which that very clearly was. Like that was people who had a lot of exposure, who had been rolling their profits into new collections, start to take some of that off the board, and then top buyers had to get washed out, all that. And then we'll see how sustaining it is.
Plus the SOS airdrop, man. It's a nice little, people are calling that the NFT stimulus. I mean, that's a nice way. It's kind of funny, like the way that play. How do you think this airdrop plays out? I imagine a lot of people watching right now also caught a little stimulus. What's your play with that? Have you sold yours? Are you holding it? Do you think there's any value?
I sold mine. So on my public wallet, I got about 1 billion SOS, which ended up being worth like $6,000, I think. So $6,000 airdrop for, I think on that wallet, I'm a pretty middle of the road NFT buyer. So like that was not a nothing airdrop. I was not personally willing to hold it very long. On another wallet, I sold it way too soon. So that was a little disappointing, but I think they may be able to do something interesting there. It's called the opendao.com. That's the website.
Yep.
And we'll see what comes of it. I'll flip to it.
I was going to try to pull it up.
It's always a little tricky there when you're opening a new tab.
I open it on the other screen and then pull it over, but I was also looking at like what's up on my Twitter.
You
got it.
So they to pay tribute, to protect, to promote, there's some kind of like safety mechanism that they're trying to create here. I'm not exactly sure what this is trying to be. I find it interesting, but I don't know. I like the free money, so for now, I'll take the free money.
It's a funny thought experiment of like, this is one of the few spots in crypto where they almost did create value out of thin air. It was like, all right, we'll airdrop this token just randomly, like just created it one day. It's distributed based on people's volume, and it's like,
I love it. I love it as a distribution mechanism. I think it's fantastic.
I thought it was good. I thought anyone complaining about that, I did see some complaints. They were saying, well, this isn't fair. Now there's whales. And it's like, no, people were rewarded proportionally to them using a product, just like everything else has kind of worked in the past.
Yeah.
Uniswap, other things.
It's better than giving it to like VCs or whatever.
Right.
It's purely based on your involvement in the ecosystem. So, I think it's cool. Maybe it does big stuff. My thing was like, okay, I'm going to take the win for what it is, and then I can buy this. Like if it proves itself over more time, I can always buy it and trade it. So I didn't know enough about it up front to like sit there and, not take a 5-figure airdrop. I'm happy to take a 5-figure airdrop and pay for my Christmas presents or whatever. What do you think?
I mean, it's a weird, I'm trying to think of other airdrops that can give us like an example. The only other one that I can think of where you were airdropped for using a service, but there really isn't a protocol that's going to like support this. Because it's not like OpenSea is supporting this, right? They very clearly tweeted out and said, we're not involved.
Yeah.
This isn't,
it would have been more like what Uniswap did, right? Like it's
sure. So I don't think we can really use those as precedent because, Uniswap and those, it's like they were incorporating those in the protocol, and the team is kind of helping create value is probably the wrong word legally to use. Whatever. They're incorporating into the ecosystem. The only other example I can think of is like good bridging that was airdropped to people that used AVAX's bridge. And I just pulled up that chart, and I'm not going to lie, dude, that does not look good. And I remember when it came out, I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. It could pump. I'll pull it up for people that can't see it, Ledge, if you let me share again.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I should say, I actually still hold this. So, I'm incentivized for you to talk about it.
Yeah. But, you might not like what I have to say, though, because if you look at what happened with SOS and now what's happened with good bridging, I do remember when this came out, I was quite excited too. I was like, this is kind of cool. It's airdropped to a very, select number of people that are probably committed to AVAX. Maybe we can do something cool here. The problem with some of these airdrops where there isn't a protocol directly supporting them and saying, we're going to incorporate it, it's going to give you governance, all these things, is it kind of fizzles unless there's someone really pushing the agenda and saying, let's do something here. I haven't heard anyone talk about good bridging or what the value of this would be other than like, it's cool that you were early into AVAX. Yeah. Like, what is that? You know what I mean? Like, who's going to really push the value of SOS? Unless you're just an NFT whale, like we kind of need a keyboard monkey and some of these guys to band together where it seems like they're just like, thanks for the free money. I'll go buy NFTs. So I'm not sure if the precedent, if we're using these as examples, the outlook isn't so good for SOS.
I need to qualify. I bought quite a bit of this throughout basically until I eventually just gave up. So I'm at a huge L on it because I thought that there was more of a plan. So I agree. Like you have to have a plan for what do you do next. The other element of that one was it was perfectly linear. So every address got the same amount of coins. And that's the downside. Right. Like you want to complain about SOS, but honestly, high volume whales on OpenSea getting more is actually good for the price to stay up because if everybody
make them committed.
Yeah. If everybody got a linear amount, it's going to be a lot of money to some of those people who had not done much and they would have been much more likely to just dump it. Versus if you've done $1 million or something of volume on OpenSea and you get a $10,000 airdrop or whatever that amount equated to, then it's kind of like, okay, whatever. Like that's nice, but I don't need to dump it or it creates a better incentive structure. So yeah, I hope that they do something. The lack of plan for what's next for the good bridging side of things did incentivize me to say like, all right, I'm just going to take my open down for what it's worth and then play with it later if it's necessary.
Yeah. So I don't know. I treated it like a stimulus. I did not get as much as you. I think I had like 150 million. Funny enough, a lot of my NFT buys have either been Axie, which is their proprietary marketplace, or now Funks, which is on their own marketplace. So it's like a lot of my NFT stuff, and I just am not that big in NFTs, was off OpenSea. That's like where the majority of my volume was. So I was not an SOS whale.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some people, I think Keyboard Monkeys was, he publicly dumped his, it was like $300,000 or something. That's quite a lot of volume. His fees were insane. Somebody also talked about SOS being essentially like a fee rebate is kind of what it acted as. I thought that was an interesting way to think about it. I'm very curious. I hope it does really, really well. Like I won't cope about it. I'll just buy it back if it starts to look productive. The 9x9x9 guy is really interesting. He owns a bunch of the 101 penguins, and I think he owns a bunch of doodles and stuff. His incentive structure seems really good as well, in terms of what he wants to do with it. So I'm sure he has a plan.
We'll see. Breeze in the chat said I sold because I had no idea why people were buying. Honestly, man, that might be like that's
most bullish part of it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I can see it from both sides, but I don't know. I'm skeptical.
Yeah,
skeptical.
All right. Well, let's talk about a couple other things in token landscape. I want to look at Ethereum. Ethereum on the weekly has been consolidating since November. It still looks like quite good if you're in log mode and put it on daily or something. It just looks like this incredible compression. Like it's just waiting to the end of the year to move. It certainly looks like it's got a bullish bias to me, in particular on the daily, a little less so on the weekly after those down weeks. Like you would expect a better thrust, but man, you look at that daily, if you squunch that down a little bit, it's pretty tight there. Like it looks like dips would be for buying. It looks like it wants to break up. It doesn't look like a bull market that's over. It looks like a bull market that has just been on pause for many months now. If you consider ETH really topped momentum-wise back in May. So May to the end of December, it's at the same dollar price, you know?
Yep. That's also when it peaked in Bitcoin terms too, was that May. Yeah. And we're literally at the exact same price in Bitcoin terms for ETH. It's like this breakout gave the retest last week. Now we're doing the retest thing again. We just can't get above this 0.08. It's giving us some trouble.
Yeah. So
if that happens though, I mean, ETHUSD is going to just rip.
Oh yeah. Like obviously something like this has the capacity to double or triple off of a consolidation like that if it moves up, because 6 or 7 months of bull market that we've all called a bull market where we made the majority of our money, it was not in majors. It was in layer one trades and all the things we've been talking about on Weekly Open for months now. It was AVAX and Solana, and it wasn't DeFi, it wasn't ETH, it wasn't BTC, it wasn't any of the things that were popular last year. NFTs had a prolonged multi-month bear market after a summer pump, but there was this rotation trade, whether it was GameFi, like you've talked about Axie so much, whether it was rotations of NFTs. There were so many ways that the market did things, especially in the latter half of the year, that were just outside of the normal structure of like BTC and ETH are dominant for the majority of the time, and then other stuff pumps for a small amount of time. They completely flipped from last cycle and prior cycles. So I really think 2022 is going to start with a pretty significant move from majors, and liquidity flowing mostly back to those majors or catch up trades, or maybe this DeFi thing is pretty short lived and then the money goes into majors and then you have a broader move. I could see something like that. I feel like for the health of the market overall, though, you have to have a move in these majors where it doesn't immediately flow down to like Solana and and Terra Luna and everything else. I think that's been a real challenge this year.
At what point do we start calling these things majors? I mean, Solana's, for all intents and purposes, number 4 if you don't count stable coins. You have Luna is basically number 7 then. Avalanche almost in the top 10.
Especially,
I mean, are these the new majors now? Is this the new? I used to call Litecoin, EOS, Ripple, ETH the majors. It's like, are these the majors now, or layer ones now getting clogged up? For 2022, I mean.
Yeah. I was just going to look something up, and I'll put it on here. So this is the Ethereum market cap. So Ethereum's market cap it flipped above 60 billion in November 2020, so a year ago. And that's what you just showed with Solana, is at 60 billion market cap today. I think that's a fascinating way to look at it in terms of, is it a major? Well, it would have been a major just a year ago. So from a market cap perspective, I think, yeah, like some of those have entered the territory that we considered majors just a year ago. So that is a hint to just how much the market has evolved as a whole, how much new money, whether it's the crypto equivalent of money printing, which is creation of new coins, or if it's actual capital inflows from other markets into these, that's pretty significant. So I don't think it's unreasonable to think that Solana, AVAX, all that, a 2x, a 3x, a 4x is now a huge deal, right? Solana going from $2 to $8 is not as big of a deal as Solana going from $200 to $800. That will take more work because the actual market cap is so much different. There will be more upside in 2022 in stuff that is lower market cap overall, because climbing into the top 10 is easier than climbing within the top 10. And it's just a tougher battle for non-Bitcoin, non-ETH stuff to make the huge multiples. Just for the same reason, like if we see ETH or Bitcoin double from here, 100K, let's call it 10K, those targets are massive accomplishments. That's like, holy crap, look what we've achieved with these majors. And we're going to have to start thinking about the AVAX and SOL trades similarly. 200 to 400 is a huge deal. It's not the same as it was from 2 to 4 or 10 to 20 or whatever, because the total dollars required to enter are just gargantuan. It's required to make that next leap.
Right. Yeah. Like 2022, like let's say the layer 1 trade, which was the most lucrative trade, the most obvious trade really for the past 3 or 4 months. Even if you relate to those, you joined like in October, you were still doing quite well. Solana, AVAX, Luna. This year, if those continue to do well, it's a bit of like a different thesis. Like for as much people want to say, I was buying the layer 1 because potentially it's like an ETH killer and it's a relative value thing. It's like the other part of why people, at least myself, like why I was buying AVAX was it was a much small, like people were moving out on the risk curve. I mean, that's what drives a lot of narratives in crypto is like, okay, ETH isn't going to pump that much, but AVAX is only at, 2 billion market cap or something, or 5 billion market cap or something. If it pumps, it's ways to have those multiples. Now, like if the layer 1 trade survives, let's say some in 2022, and people are still bidding Solana, AVAX, Luna, it's like some of that is gone from this trade. Like I do wonder how much, how long that can exist, or if we just get an entirely new slate of layer 1s. If people move down the risk curve a little bit more and they only buy Near, Harmony, and Dusk or whatever it might be.
I think that's, I don't know that the next layer 1 trade is the same as the previous layer 1 trade. Like even Matic, I think it's 18 billion, something like that right now. That's pretty freaking big too. So can Matic go from 280, which is what it is right now, to $10? Sure, but that puts it fully in Solana territory. I don't know what size Near is. I think it's not small. From FDV might be a meme, but I think if you look at this and say, oh, I'm early, I think that's also a bit of a fool's errand. I mean, this was sub $2 and it's at 15.
It's 10 billion.
10 billion. So will it go from 15 to 50? Maybe, if it's the next version of this. I just think if you look at it and say, this is going to do exactly what Solana did, it's going to go from $2 to 200. I think that's optimistic. You know what I mean?
That's pretty big.
It's big. I think it's very optimistic. Whereas I think if you say this has an opportunity to move, and I'm going to set my expectations on a relative basis, not on an exact replica basis, then I think you can have a lot of upside for yourself. Right. I would just be hesitant thinking like, oh yeah, well this is going to do 100x because that's what happened last year. I got 100x last year. I'm going to get 100x this year. I think this next year is going to be a little more rewarding to swing traders, people willing to play lower moves with lower expectations. Maybe I'm coping, but that's my 2 cents. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just I think if the layer 1 trade survives this year, I think it'll be. I think there's a possibility that, and I don't want to, try to over rotate or, people got punished for that this year of saying, what's the next Solana, AVAX, Luna? It was much smarter just to be in Solana, AVAX, and Luna. If you were rotating too early, it was like you kind of don't understand the trade. I do think that they're approaching the size where it's the same thing that kind of clogged up DeFi of when projects get stuck in this, top 5 to top 10. It's like DeFi kind of got stuck up there. And it also fueled a bit of the L1 trade because people were saying, why would I keep buying these DeFi governance coins that are already valued at 50 billion, 100 billion fully diluted when I could just buy this layer 1, which has a much lower valuation. And even if I'm wrong, it'll probably pump a little bit. And it's like, I think.
But now if the layer 1 is higher valuation, it's the same trouble.
No, that's what I mean. So I think if the layer 1 trade survives this year, I'm not trying to fall into the mistake of rotating too soon or thinking that things can be the next Solana, AVAX, Luna. But I think if there is going to be a layer 1 continued trade that does well this year, I think it will be in people moving further out on the risk curve and saying, okay, what's a layer 1 that can have momentum for 3 or 6 months? And, they start looking at Near, even if that's too big. Maybe they start looking at Phantom. They start looking at Dusk, Harmony. I think that's the only way that the layer 1 trade really survives this year is kind of the same reason it kicked off last year. Is people saying, I'm going to take a little more risk. This is a smaller market cap. Yes, it's a way lower chance that it does, can compete with ETH. But if it does do that, it's going to do very well for a long time. So I don't know.
I personally think that the narratives of 2022 are going to be layer 2s having similar responses to layer 1s. And then the other element is going to be like the multi-chain thesis of tooling that enables stuff happening multi-chain. I am incentivized to that. There's a project that I've invested in called Layer 0 that I think is going to be a big part of that narrative. But I think we're seeing people's willingness to bridge and go play on all those different platforms. And I think what we're going to see is a lot of interest in the tools that make that better. And even on the NFT side, where the financialization tools for NFTs are probably going to be something where we realize like, oh, here's a need. I need to be able to borrow against my NFTs, or I need to do like more fractionalization stuff, or who knows what, some kind of tooling for NFTs may have more upside than punks. And pulling layer 1s together may have more upside than the layer 1s themselves. As you see the success story for one particular theme, you start to realize the needs of like what else needs to be built here. Another one is there's the Cosmos ecosystem and how they're kind of building. Cosmos is a cosmos like in space. And then like each individual chain within it, they all kind of talk to each other through their platform. Like so a thematic thing like that, app specific or use case specific chains secured by the primary chain, like that might be really big. And those are just, it's trying to figure out, and a nod to Kobe's post that went absolutely nuts over the past week is kind of trying to identify the metagame, right? What are going to be the themes that the market latches onto and goes and does something with. You're pulling up.
Here's a theme. This would be a blast from the past. If this actually happens, it's certainly happening this week. I don't know the last time in a 1 week period where, if you basically bet on any DeFi play, you're up probably 25%. I mean, there's some that underperform, but Sushi's up 60% the past week, Aave at 50%. DeFi is catching a serious bid, or is it just like the marginal buyer has gone from 0 to like now there's 2 marginal buyers and no one was buying this a month or 2 ago? Any buyers are really pumping these things. Like a lot of the DeFi charts actually look quite good. We talked about this before we started the show, but we're at a weird spot in the market where I bought comp and I think you bought sushi. But some of these charts are, in my opinion, for the first time in a long time, are starting to look like easier setups or easier trades. Like I can kind of make the case for them doing well a little bit easier than I can something like AVAX or Solana or the other ones where the charts are like, you know, it plays, it's a little bit what we just talked about where they're so big. It's like, how much more can they pump? But these charts are also starting to look a little bit ugly. You look at Solana USD, it's like, okay, what am I buying here? I'm buying hopefully we get a breakout another month in a row versus like the sushi, the comp, the Aave. It's like, that's a pretty normal, these are the crypto setups I'm used to that I've traded for a few years that, you know, it's pretty easy to see. It looks like they bottomed. 20 to 50% pump looks like it's going to happen quick. What do you think about this DeFi resurgence? You think this lasts going into the new year?
I don't know that it's going to be across the board. I think sushi and Aave are outperforming for a reason. Because it fits multiple narratives. One, DeFi got wrecked, right? You couldn't do anything on ETH DeFi. And what we saw is some DeFi stuff decided to go where the users are. So Aave deployed on AVAX and Sushi went multi-chain. And despite Sushi's drama, that really knocked Sushi down so much, like with all their internal drama. Well, now it's getting play as like another Danny coin. And you're seeing Aave and Sushi be willing to build the tools and go to the places where the users are. And I think that creates an inherent narrative that's probably stronger than Uni or comps. I also think Curves is pretty strong, but for a different reason. Like there's other dynamics in play. But I think the Sushi and Aave one is the same. It's that they are fulfilling some of these other narratives that we talked about, being multi-chain and also going more horizontal with the tool set. So like, I think DeFi apps are going to start to look more like banks, where every single DeFi app needs to provide essentially all the services that a bank would provide, right? Like you need to be able to provide swapping. You need to be able to provide borrowing and lending. You need to be able to provide, you know, stable yields or whatever. And I think the overlap of products for each of them is going to become more distinct, so that like Sushi and Aave essentially are the same products that started in different places. And I'm really curious how that plays out. But yeah, I think those two are getting a push for a good reason. And that makes me a little bearish on your like comp follow trade. Like I think it might work for a little bit, but I think you play that trade and then you'd be willing to get out of it and then buy the next like Sushi consolidation instead, or the next Aave consolidation instead, rather than trying to stick on to the comp will follow narrative forever if comp is not willing to make the same adjustments that Aave is.
Right. I can see that. I guess I always just used to play, at least when DeFi, even DeFi Summer 2.0, where it was the pumps were a lot smaller. It was like this theme DeFi versus like, you know, the layer ones. Layer ones, you really never benefited from trying to rotate and pick new layer ones. DeFi seemed like, you know, buying the laggard was a working trade, like for a while, like because they all moved so closely together that if Aave is doing this exact thing where it bottoms and then it basically pumps to, I mean, we're almost to where we broke down from, right? This is broke down from November. It's like, okay, where would comp be if it moves similar to Aave? It's like up at 350. So yeah, it'll be a really big test going into the new year. It's like, does buying a laggard in DeFi still work, or is this just an Aave and Sushi thing for the reasons you mentioned?
You start to see so much stuff that's different between the DeFi plays. And I think you're right. I think the early stages, they move together. But then you realize like, okay, well, Synthetics is going to be fully committed to optimism and their daily active users are low and all this stuff. And you see the like political thought processes from Kane that are very different from those of people behind Aave. And I think you'll start to see more discrepancies in the price action that represent that. Early, I think the catch up trade is fine. I think synthetics and comp and whatever will probably do okay. I wouldn't hold those for as long. Whereas it's a little too early to say, but sushi is the one I went in on. Obviously I did it for a reason. So I'm pumping my own bags, but like my narrative was around this. It got crapped on because of, all the like DeLong leaving, centralized entity that pushed people out, contributors out. It's basically getting a community takeover. It's at $2 billion FTV. So the upside is higher, and they've shown their willingness. The people that are committing to the ecosystem have shown their willingness to just integrate however and wherever people want to use the product. So if they somehow succeed at kind of a community takeover, I think that would be absolutely fascinating, and has the potential to be very rewarding for sushi holders. And it's the type of thing where I think that thesis may play out long enough to where I just hold it for quite a while. And like, what if sushi goes to $100? Like, that would massively reward me. And $100 sushi is from 2 to 20 billion. So that would make sushi Matic sized. So like, is that possible? Yes, it's absolutely possible. I can think in my head how sushi can become Matic sized. That doesn't make me like freak out. A 5x, right? No, maybe Uni is still 20 billion too. I can't remember.
Yeah,
it is. It's 20 billion FTV. So a 10x makes sushi today's Uni size. And if Uni 3x's, it would make Uni 60 billion, which puts it back to where it was when it was in the top 10. So a 3x from Uni, a 10x from sushi wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just welcome the a new paradigm here. It's been so long since it's just been a running joke of buying DeFi. You get screwed. It's like, it'd be fun. It's a new game to think about of DeFi coming back. How do you play it? I love it.
I think it's I think what we saw before, and let me go to this sushi versus ETH trade. And you could just do this as DeFi perp versus ETH too. It doesn't matter. This is the 2017 altcoin chart relative to Bitcoin, except this time it's relative to ETH. Like, these are weekly levels. That's what my lines are. It just goes and sweeps those weekly lows and then bounces back up. So obviously we'll see if my narrative really has legs or not once it kind of bests the next level. So the near term trade, maybe it has another 20-30%, but if it makes it back to the range highs relative to ETH, that's like another 3-4x.
It's not bad.
That would be a heck of a trade. And it would be very fitting relative to these, Bitcoin relative charts that we recall so well, right? Like, you just wait till it's the bottom of the range and then you play it to the top of the range. There's your multiples, move on, collect your chips. We'll see if it plays out, but I'm very interested in that trade for the next 3 months, let's say.
I hope a lot doesn't change the next week, because I am too, man. It'd be a really fun Q1 2022. I don't know if there's another theme that I'm not excited about outside of just moving down the risk curve of layer ones, looking at things like Near, Dusk, Harmony. I mean, I can't think of anything else outside of that.
One other in that DeFi landscape that cracks me up is Wi-Fi. I mean, look at this. This is classic capitulation reclaim, like a spring off of the lows. This is Wi-Fi relative to ETH. If you look at Wi-Fi relative to the dollar, it's like one of the most garbage looking chop charts ever.
Yeah, I was going to say that is horrible.
It's so bad. But if you look relative to ETH, you really see how people who've been invested in this ecosystem, how they feel, right? Like, they saw their one Wi-Fi go from being worth more than 100 ETH to being worth 5 ETH. So they're down 95% on a relative basis. And down here, the Wi-Fi team made a change to essentially where they're going to be a buyback model.
Buyback, yeah.
So they're going to buy their own coin with protocol revenue. And whether that works long term, I don't know. Is it a trade that's applicable right now? Absolutely. It's absolutely applicable.
Yeah, you know what got me excited when the Wi-Fi team announced that? I think a lot of, myself included, have looked at DeFi and said, what's going to, nothing can be as crazy as DeFi 1.0. the mechanisms that they were creating at the time, the distribution. It's like, it's really hard to recreate that atmosphere. And then YFI announces they're going to do that buyback. It makes me think, like, the DeFi teams, at least back then, whenever someone had a good idea that would work, that would pump a coin, it was like they would all just adopt that. So when YFI announces that, it does kind of make you think. It's like, okay, how could DeFi have a resurgence? It's like, maybe they all just start copying each other in terms of if this works for YFI. It's like, how many teams are going to announce this new buyback? It's like they have to somehow create the game that moves all these things up again.
Yeah, and I do think there's a little bit of danger, because when it's based on buybacks, it's based on your actual protocol usage. So it's more like the way you think of value, right? In value stocks, it's based on what is it actually doing from a revenue generation perspective today? What's it delivering to people who hold this asset? Whereas a growth thing, it's like the multiples can be ridiculous. It's just an assumption that, okay, a lot more people are going to use this thing in the future. It's not based on protocol revenue today. Your upside is probably bigger on growth stuff. So I feel like Wi-Fi or something like that, where it's based on actual protocol revenue, it's not going to get as out of hand as something where you can create a growth narrative around it. One more DeFi thing that I wanted to look at, the old Link Marines have been coping for a while too, because Link versus ETH topped in August 2020, and it's down quite a lot on an ETH relative basis. Even after it bottomed, it's still down 86%, but Link went down 90% on an ETH relative basis. And this is another thematic play where, maybe it returns to the mean. Now, again, am I looking for a 10x? No, but could you get another 2x from here and kind of return back into the chop zone? Absolutely. And I think that's what defines my 2022, is to set my expectations at like here, and then force the market to encourage me to set my expectations higher once we get there, based on what price action does from that point. Yeah.
I think it's fair. It's a rational way to go into this. Obviously, if we keep pumping, it's like, are we going to move those targets up?
I feel like that sushi line has just gone vertical since you've put the comparison trade up.
It has, dude.
It's great.
It has.
Another thing I noticed with sushi is it used to be very, very liquid. And I saw today that something like $50 million of liquidity exited sushi pools in the past week or two, which can be thought of as capitulation, or it can be thought of as essentially a dollar cost average dip buy. So somebody that was providing liquidity the whole way down has a lot more sushi now. They pull their liquidity and they're not going to get impermanent lost on the way up. So I found that interesting. And now sushi will now move faster on the way up because there's less liquidity to absorb all the demand. So there's a lot of game theory here. And if you think that there's not, some Giga Chad whale types that are highly incentivized here, then you're wrong. Like, there's some big boy games being played with these pumps. And what we'll see is, are these the exit pumps similar to like January 2018, or is this real? I don't know.
I hope it's real, man. It's going to make, as I said, it's going to make a very fun quarter one. I'm not sure it'll last all 2022, but one quarter of DeFi season, I'd be happy.
As a believer in DeFi, I hope it's real as well. And I think what has to exist to make it real is affordability and ease of use across multiple chains. And that's why I think, to your charts point, I think the protocols that are willing to go to those places and carry their brand to those places are going to have a really good opportunity. The chat's asked us where are Don and Josh, and they're out. It's between Christmas and New Year's, guys. We're recording with the people that are available. So
I think Don's on a beach. Last time I saw him, Josh, I'm not sure.
He's family, but
family.
Yeah, it's a holiday. Luke and I just made ourselves available today, so here we are. We're happy to be with you.
Yep.
All right, so I want to spend a few minutes talking about, what do you think potential targets are for Bitcoin and Ethereum in 2022? Do you think we're going to have a full year of the cycle, or do you think we're going to have a strong potential probabilistically? Where do you think, what kind of potential do we have to enter a bear market in 2022, begin a bear market? What are your predictions for the year?
Oh gosh, is this basically the question simplified is this a super cycle? That's what you're asking me.
A super cycle are a super cycle or a multi-year cycle the same thing? I guess so. Super cycle to me is kind of like new paradigm, right? Like there is no more 85% down in Bitcoin.
Yeah. I think the way that I always understood it, and it's also kind of my belief on what's happening, is I think we're going to get, I think the sell-off that we had around May, what was that, May? I have a drink in the way. May, I think that's going to be a lot more normal. I think, I don't think new paradigm that we're only, it's up only forever. But I do think the sell-offs that we're having, at least, as long as it's risk on in other markets, as long as stocks are still making new all-time highs every single week, it's like there's so many games to play. Someone said it's never a bear market now if you're a rotator. And it feels like there's so many games in crypto where if it's layer ones, maybe it's NFTs, maybe it's DeFi making a resurgence for a little bit. It seems like there's so many different games that are completely separated from each other, at least a little bit, that I don't know. I don't think the bear markets are going to look like they did in the past. I don't think we have a year and a half of no volatility. I just don't think that's the case. And it doesn't mean that we're not going to have 85% pullbacks relative to each other, right? DeFi, you could say, has been in a bear market for a full year. It's down 85% versus Bitcoin, 90% versus ETH. But it's like, was that a bear market for the whole market? No. It's like Bitcoin was down 50%, but only lasted 2 months. I think that if we have bear markets or pullbacks in 2022, I think they're going to look very similar to what we had in May, where we have 50 or 60% drops. I don't think that's going to stop. But I think, once that happens, I don't think it's going to be a year-long lull of no volatility. So I honestly don't think we get the year-long bear or 2-year-long bear or anything like that starts in 2022. I think it's likely that we get another drop like we did at some point in the year, like we did in May. We're going to have 60% drops. I don't think the volatility entirely leaves the market for a year.
Yeah, I think you'll have bounces even in a bear market. You'll have the ability to play things. I think that our bear markets will start to correlate more with legacy bear markets. Like if legacy markets go into a recession, if we have a recession, it's going to be bad for Bitcoin and Ethereum, in my mind, until they bottom. And then Bitcoin and Ethereum will respond really well off of those recession lows. And after the 2008 Great Recession, stock market stuff bottomed in 2009. The recession didn't end until, like, you really would have to point to 2011, 2012, where as the numbers started recovering, but the market's priced that in way ahead of time. So I agree with you there. Like, we can establish bottoms from a bear market in a 6 to 12 month time frame, and then struggle to make new low or new highs for maybe another year or 2 years or whatever, before you hit the resurgence on price exploration.
Right.
So yeah, I agree with that. I actually think that it's possible we go at least 6 months, maybe all 12 months of 2022 without having some kind of like significant top, significant like bear market beginning, multi-year, no new all-time highs. I'm a believer that from the point of price exploration, that it's a multi-year cycle. That was my theory going into this year. We actually got quite close to my overall 2021 targets. Doesn't look like I'm going to nail it, but I thought we'd hit both 6K on ETH and 60K on Bitcoin. Interestingly enough, we hit it on Bitcoin, but didn't quite hit my target on ETH. And I think the layer 1 trade is to thank for that. I think that Bitcoin itself looks pretty constructive. It's funny, we kind of hit similar points, but looking at very different things. So you were looking at kind of the range trade setup. And when I look at things from a momentum perspective, I think that we could not go necessarily up only, but 70, 80K, very much in the cards in my mind in the first quarter or two. And a lot of people will just think, man, that's boring. But like when you look at the long term of this felt like a really long time in this bear market, or like this chop fest of 2019. But those set up the really big moves that you get out of those. And I think what could happen is we blow out of the top of this at some point if we're going to have this super cycle. And at some point in 2022, we get a big move up into 6-figure Bitcoin, and then we slow down for a long time. So yeah, I think we're gonna finally see 6-figure Bitcoin in 2022. That'll be my prediction.
The other thing that kind of supports your view and what I was saying as well is the violence of the tops, like just even how they look and how they've played out. They're much more rounded. I think that's also playing out in the bottoms. And it's the reason why, if you go back to 2017, 2018, when we have blow off tops, it's like that many people are just kind of devastated of like, man, that kind of had to be a peak. Things got way too euphoric. Things were moving up at such a rapid pace. People get blown out. And then you have this period where it's like the market has to collect itself again. People have to believe that wasn't the end of it all and that wasn't the peak. Now we're kind of getting these rounded tops where it's like, okay, if the top wasn't as violent, the bottom probably won't be as violent either. And, not only is that just like a market belief thing and psychology of a lot of the participants, but it's also as institutional investors get in, I think Avi Feldman explained it really great. He's like, look, there's a lot more people in this market now that just want to collect. Their hurdle is 20%. So when things get, Bitcoin hits 60K, it's like they're happy to take some profits, let things dip, and then they scale back in. Yeah. So institutions, like you are starting to see that footprint on the chart of things might be a little more rounded at the top, less violent. And it'll probably also means the bear markets are less drawn out and less brutal. It's like,
I think that the blow off in 2017 was really after Thanksgiving, 6K to 20K over 5 weeks or so was really how the top blew off. And I think making that type of move now is quite difficult. I mean, if you go back and just look at the magnitude of those candles, I think doing that with Bitcoin, the asset today, is a bit harder. The counterpoint to that is certainly if you look at the size of like Tesla's run, for instance, from 800 to 1200, that's one of the largest assets in the world, and it did a 2x over the course of like 4 weeks. So it can happen, but that was one of the most exceptional asset runs that I can recall. And again, you put it on linear and you start to see it presented where it's like gap up on Monday, go up only all week, gap up again the next Monday, go all week, gap up again the next Monday, go all week, gap up again the next Monday, go all week. That's 4 weeks of just absolute short squeeze explosion to $1,200. That's going to be really difficult to do and sustain. And if we get that, then it'll be, in my mind, similar to what I think we have going on in the legacy markets with Tesla now, a setup for a multi-year consolidation at best, right? Like, I don't think Tesla is going from 1,200 to 3,000 or something, like in 2022. I think a stock like this, after this type of move, has to consolidate for a really long time. And I think that's getting that to sort of explosive blow off top in Bitcoin, I think is going to be really challenging.
Ledger, I want to bring in one more thing before we wrap this up, and it kind of also lines up nicely with how will Bitcoin do in 2022? What are people's expectations? Because we have a model that failed, right? Yeah, some people's belief system of how well Bitcoin can do. What are your thoughts on the Cope Fest that's happening? Apparently, the stock to flow model is still intact, which I think is this is funny to watch unfold. But what's your take here on Plan B, kind of backtracking, moving the goalposts I think in a big way?
It's exactly moving the goalposts, and that's even from goalposts that have hilarious variants for interpretation.
Being correct.
Yeah. And I think that I think it's pure cope. It's a meme that is less relevant today. I think if Bitcoin was the only dominant asset in the space, it could have lived. But I think what we've seen is Bitcoin market share being taken away in a continued fashion from Ethereum as a store of value and from other coins from a execution standpoint. And will we get back into the stock to flow model at some point? Absolutely. And he'll be screaming win. But I think all these models are just built to be broken.
The funniest part about this stock to flow, so there's two camps now. There's people that say stock to flow isn't broken. Plan B's rules for it being invalidated, which were 100K before the end of the year. Maybe they believe him. Maybe they say, you know what, he was just trying to simplify it. Even if he literally said, if it's not at 100K, it's broken. The most telling part of what's happening with this stock to flow model that I find quite interesting is he keeps sharing this. This is a chart. I hope it doesn't. People can still see that, right? So he's saying, look, it's still within one standard deviation, 50K to 200K. The most interesting thing about his recent tweets with this chart is this actually isn't the Bitcoin stock to flow. This is a smoothed out moving average model of the stock to flow. If you were to actually look at the stock to flow, which he shares frequently, the colorful one, let me see, this one. This is the true stock to flow. So the stock to flow of Bitcoin, or the predicted price of the model, right? This white line has been basically 100K since what is that, like March or April of 2020. And Bitcoin's price, March of 2020, everyone knows, okay, so it can't forecast the Corona crash. I get it. It was below 10K, right? So like Bitcoin was like at 6K to 10K all the way through mid 2020. The model was already predicting we're at 100K. It's still predicting we're at 100K. Really, it's predicting we're at like 200K almost.
Based on the halving cycle to move the stock to flow targets, right?
Right. So it's like we've been at this 100K. So it's like, even if you think the model is still alive, I know there's going to be some people that are like, why are you hating on Plan B? I like Plan B. I love that people are creating models that are helping us understand Bitcoin scarcity, that are kind of pushing forward the space understanding of, can we model out how much this thing is going to be worth? The most interesting, I think, for people that still think the stock to flow is alive, I do think it's worth considering how helpful is a model that predicted, Bitcoin's price to be at 100K now for the past 6 months, where price is like below 10K and potentially it could be up to 300K and still correct.
If an asset needs to be like 5x its current valuation to fit your model, it's not tradable. It might be investable.
Yeah.
It might be a data point in your investment thesis, but it's certainly not tradable.
I think it's helpful in understanding Bitcoin scarcity. I'm not sure. I would love to see if someone could create a model or a rule set that allows you to profit from this. I'm not sure it's helpful at all in your investment and trading decisions. That's what I would say. I think it's helpful in understanding Bitcoin scarcity, but this has been a really, really fun, entertaining thing to watch at the end of 2021 as the stock to flow fall apart in a way. I don't know.
Well, you know what happens as soon as you write it off? It's like the opposite happens, and it runs straight to 100K. And
I would love that.
Plan B gets to 2 million followers because he's a genius. He called it. That's what it always is, right? He's like the new Vinny Oracle. You can be wrong 9 times, but when you get it right the one time, you called it. You nailed it. Good job.
Right.
Meanwhile, to be quite honest, there's no greater loser in 2021 than a Bitcoin holder. Investing in almost anything else was a better investment. Anything else within crypto, certainly. Almost anything else in the legacy market, like any meme stock outperformed Bitcoin in 2021. I don't even know how Bitcoin did relative to like the S&P 500. You know what I mean? I hope that 2022 is the year for Bitcoin to, reestablish some dominance and go, tell everybody it still matters. But 2021 was not a good year for holding Bitcoin.
It's tough. I don't know. I wouldn't know. I was, chasing layer ones and buying Pokemon.
Bitcoin holder.
I mean, I got some coin, but it's it's not something I think about too much.
Bitcoin. I am leveraged long Bitcoin right at this moment. So
there we go.
I longed at 48K when my favorite pattern filled out, which was flipping the 20-day, bouncing off the 200, looked good. I was well underexposed to Bitcoin, so I both bought Bitcoin outright and I leveraged it a little bit on top of that. So I'm fine with Bitcoin going up, totally fine. I just don't think it's the only thing you have to be in. And I think that, my portfolio represents this. I still think the chart is better on ETH. The ETH BTC pair does look weak. I will admit that. It looks like it's kind of struggling here. It's right at important levels, but it's not great. I think these two will continue to play off each other over the course of the next year. I look forward to both Ethereum and Bitcoin making significant moves and making some ground up on the rest of these trades, seeing the hot ball of money kind of flow back into the core. I think would be very healthy for the market. If it actually works or not, I don't know. One of my bets, though, is especially around early January, a lot of the money that was in Solana, that was in AVAX, people wait till the tax year plays out, and then they roll those investments back to other things. So I think we'll see a lot of volatility in the beginning of the year. As people take their long-term capital gains, their taxable gains, whatever, against those trades. That's the exact same reason that everything pumped out of Bitcoin into alts in January 2021. It was the exact same thing. And I don't think you have to be that smart to play this market. And I think we'll see capital rotation occur at the beginning of the year. And I think that'll make it very tradable for all of us. And I'm very excited about it.
Yep. We have somehow found a way to salvage the end of the year, which looked pretty brutal a couple weeks ago. We've salvaged it. We have a Santa pump. We have potential new narratives. It's hard not to be excited about 2022.
I agree. I think that we ran ahead of a lot of the challenging elements of the market in terms of people taking money off the table for, securing the bag, taxes, whatever you want to call it. I think a lot of that was front run, and now I'm actually pretty excited about what capital rotation looks like in 2022. I'm excited about 2022 in general. Excited to be with you and Josh and Don for Weekly Open. And with that, I guess we'll call it a day.
Yep.
Thanks for being here with us, everybody. Go to weeklyopen.com to check out these episodes and more. Share Weekly Open with your friends. If you think this is a good podcast, we would appreciate your support. And go to weeklyopen.com/FTX, where you can trade crypto assets that you love, your favorite ones. You can do it on the FTX app. You can also track your portfolio and earn yield on your tokens. If it's a yield year for you in 2022, do it on FTX. weeklyopen.com/FTX. Earn 5% beyond $10,000, 8% up to $10,000.